Walmsley, weekdays from 11 a.m. to noon, right here on KCAA.
KCAA.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Andrea Roderman. This week, like every week, we'll be discussing critical legal and social justice issues that are impacting our community. Today, we'll be talking about the future of our black youth and its impact on American justice. Now, thinking about this topic, as far as the impact or the future of our black youth, I mean, there's so many different ways, and I thought of so many different ways that we could attack this particular subject. But one of the things that I was looking at when I was preparing for it is there was a statistic by the Association of American Medical Colleges. It says that black people aged 10 through 19 experienced a 78% increase in suicide in comparison to other races, right? That's a huge increase if you're looking at, what happened and comparing that number to, that number to other races. And so the question is going to be, that kind of maybe seems a little bit symbolic of really, what I think is actually happening to a certain degree in our communities when we're thinking about, all kinds of different type of trauma and many of the things that, that we're seeing. There are those who are accrediting the issue to potentially the things that they've saw on television. But I think a lot of it is a little bit more structured. And when I say structured, I think structured from the perspective that when we think about our, the way things, when you think about the 60s and think about the 50s and you're thinking about a time period where, there was segregation. I think that to a certain degree during the period of at least legalized segregation, there was this, the children obviously were in our community and in our own schools. And in many cases, especially when we talk about the South, oftentimes they were in our schools being supervised by people within our community. And, there was a communal, probably more of a communal feel around the country. So you just can imagine this, that if you live in a place where before integration, where a child is going to probably from K through 12 going to a school that, in many ways could have potentially been subpar, but at the same time you had, individuals that looked like you. You had probably teachers from your own community, and, that had, at least I believe, there's a different feel to school. When I was in the third grade, I remember I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Roan, and Miss Roan went to church with my grandmother, right? Or went to church with us, but knew my grandmother very well. And it was a different environment because of the way that she treated me in the classroom. It had an impact on the way I acted in school. It had an impact on the way I acted around other people. There was a different feel and a different vibe, including the situation where, there was a time where, the teacher may take you to school because somebody couldn't take you to school. You know what I mean? You knew those individuals within your community. Now what we have going on in, there isn't a communal feeling or feel, being that when you go to school and you send your children to school, you're sending them into a environment where racism begins its structure. And there's a level of structural racism in our educational system. Structural racism is a racism that, although is not necessarily a racism that is based upon some sort of legal doctrine, but based upon the manner in which it is organized and the way in which it operates, it basically, there's a result of that racial field. And so I think that when you begin to start looking at a 6-year-old in segregated Jim Crow South in the first grade, and a 6-year-old in a integrated school, think for 1 minute what would really be the benefits and what would be the disadvantages of being in a regular school. We do know that numbers don't lie. And when I say that, the numbers don't lie from the perspective that we do know that black children in school, when it comes to standardized testing, tend to fare much worse than other children.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is going to be, why is that? Why is that in almost every situation, that tends to be a pattern? And you're going to come to you can only come to a couple of different conclusions as it relates to why that would exist. Number one, is there a genetic reason why black children score less on standardized testing than other children? Or is it more of a structural reason that we fare differently when it comes to doing standardized testing? And I believe it's structural. I believe that, if you take a child and you put them in a different environment with different people who organize these tests, who write these tests, and, I think that you would probably get a different result. You know what I mean? Now, then the next question comes that now this is the kicker. When it comes to standardized testing, we're not talking about black people. We're talking about African Americans, not just black people in general, because I think that black immigrants in certain, I believe those statistics would show a different number, or as well as people who are immigrants from certain countries. So, really what is really happening, why are you coming to that? And the reason I'm talking about that, the standard, this is not a show on standardized testing. The point that I'm trying to make is we're trying to make sense of this ever increasing crisis among our black youth, both in primarily in the issue of the suicide, the mental issues, as well as just entering the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to see if we can try to make some sort of sense as to why are we seeing this trend, among our people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and that's where it comes to structural, that meaning that it is so deep seated in the manner in which our institutions have been built. Because our institutions were in many ways from the inception built to oppress.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So in other words, if I create, let's just say, and I always, I use the machine analogy. Like if me and you build a machine to make screwdrivers, and then we just decide one day, hey, you know what? I want to make wrenches. And we keep running the same machine that makes screwdrivers. This machine is going to keep making screwdrivers until we dismantle the machine and rebuild the machine to make something different.
Correct.
So, so there was a concerted effort. I think that sometimes we forget in our society the effort and the interest to oppress. So in other words, they spend a lot of time, and we're trying to create some sort of system that's going to create justice. You know what I mean? And the system that we're going to create initially was for the purpose to give people who look like us an advantage, and specifically created to give certain other people disadvantage. There are those who would disagree with it and see it more of a conspiracy type of analogy or conspiracy type of, you know, type of rhetoric, but it isn't conspiracy because I think that sometimes we try to like gloss over the fact that that was at the very essence of our society. That was part of it. It was just out of all the things that we valued as a culture and as a country. That was one of the most valuable things, to create things to make sure that certain people were given a structural advantage. Not only that, but also just as much time was spent creating it to make other people have a structural disadvantage. It's not like, okay, I'm going to create this system, and in this system I'm just trying to create it so that you and I and people like us can be equal and that we can have a fair system. It's like we're going to create it, but while we're creating this system, we're going to create it to make sure that certain people have a disadvantage. And so as we're trying to do that, we're going to make sure that, when it comes to their schooling, when it comes to the educational system was created for that purpose, with that in mind, right? And it's just like prior to Plessy, during the Plessy v. Ferguson, where, separate but equal, it was a way in which you can kind of gloss over the Constitution to make sure that people are being treated equally, when the real reality was that it gives us the legal authority to make it look like equality, but it also gives me the opportunity to say, you sat at the back of the bus, right? Why you have to ask yourself this question, and it's a fair question. It's a really fair question. Why would you create a system to make sure that black people sit at the back of the bus? It wasn't created to make sure that there was for me to believe that it would impact some sort of social norm. It was created to make sure that you were disadvantaged.
Got it.
That there was a psychological impact on that, but a psychological impact on the victims of it, and a psychological impact on those who saw it as an advantage. And so, and as we have evolved, it is in many ways continued to be that type of belief. I mean, you can, we talked about, at one point, you remember, I think it was you and I that was talking about the issue about, we know certain things when we're talking to each other, like somebody else, and I think it was when Brother Coulter was here, and it was when we were talking about the N-word maybe, and like, you have, or why they tried to oppress us, I think. But at any rate, the issue was, we know it when you see it.
Exactly.
And they try to make you believe that you're not seeing what you see. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You know it. You're not making up anything. You know that there is this idea of, a belief or an attempt to maintain a degree of advantage, to give you automatically a disadvantage, right? And so, and to make sure that people constructively think that there's a place for them and they need to stay in their place. And I think that as we look and we see young people today, it becomes a little bit more difficult for them to understand and this whole structural racism thing, because we're just living actually in a time where there is not really a safe place for them anymore.
Yeah.
And when I talk about a safe place, I'm talking about because now that we live in such an integrated society, regardless of what you think about integration, is that we're spread out now. It wasn't like, when you have a communal feeling, then at least you're around these people, and I'm not talking about ghettos. I'm talking about the fact that we had thriving middle class, upper middle class, and then sometimes wealthy class black neighborhoods. So you're surrounded by people like you, and then you feel safe. Going to school, and let's just assume you go to a school and it happens to be, during that particular time, it's an all black school. There's a completely different feel. Now, when I went to school during the 70s and the 80s, I was in a predominantly white high school from kindergarten to the time that I graduated. But it was still a time period where I think you still be in the South. There was still some sort of communal feeling there. You know what I mean? As far as going back to, just like we talk about Chris Rock, when he said he was bust. But then he went back where he's from, Brooklyn, I believe, and back to his neighborhood in Brooklyn that was not probably predominantly white. And although he said, we'll look at what he says he experienced and what the impact of that had on him going to this school. You know what I mean? So, to me, I think that there is no more safe space, places for children now, where they feel like, because they treat our men like boys and our boys like men. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, you look at, like you're looking at your 14-year-old kid like a kid. When they see a 14-year-old, they see him being black, and they treat him like a grown man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not treating him like he's just a little kid that likes to play video games. That's how you know him. That doesn't know anything, and we know that that's not the way they treat them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're saying because the structure in which the school system is set up at, as far as the standardized testing and things like that, when a kid tries so hard to surpass or overcome whatever those tests or those questions and answers are that's being posed to them to give them those grades, they try as hard as they can, but it never allow them to get to a certain level. And so therefore, because they feel, because it's set up in a certain way, when it's set up in a certain way, they feel like they're failing, and that plays a role on their psyche. And that's, and I'm trying to get an understanding in terms of how this relates to them coming out of school and the way they feel, and how it actually leads over into their behaviorism once they get out of school. You see what I'm saying? Because there's all different types of things that our kids are faced with nowadays, and I'm trying to see whether or not that structural impact coming from school is at fault for them once they leave school. Is that the place that we need to start at, that we need to look at in order to correct their behavior after that period in time? See, because they, like I say, the kids now, they battling. They battling a whole lot. And like you say, that suicide rate amongst the youth right now, when I was looking it up, it said it's the second leading cause of death. It's suicide, right? And then when you look back, what is the first leading cause of death amongst teens? Is gun violence. But I'm of the mindset is that the first leading cause of death is amongst our youth is peer pressure. That's how I look at it, because it's peer pressure that leads them into certain types of situations, right? Whether it be social media that leads them a certain way, or whether or not it be bullying, right? That, because how many times we read stories amongst ourselves where we see someone getting cyber bullied, and then it turns into suicide, or someone is gang banging online that leads to death. I mean, we hear about that stuff all the time.
Right.
And so when I say that peer pressure, bullying, and all that is the leading cause of death, that is the leading cause of number 2 and number 3. And number 2 and number 3 is suicide and gun violence. And I think that we need to take a look at that from that perspective, because it's a cycle and it's continuing. And as you know, we begin to talk about, what's going on with the juvenile justice system and stuff like that. But we need a starting point as to what we need to do now in order to figure out, to curb this problem, because it's only getting worse.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, as far as trying to figure out a way to, really address what is really going on with our youth and lobbying for them to have a better safe space. I don't know personally if our schools are really the way in which we need to look and deal with it. I mean, I know schooling and education is obviously very important. And I think that when we begin to, I think that one of the things that we have to look at, I think that we need to, we tend to be very reluctant to look at our past when we try to determine what would be a better alternative for the future. We don't really want to look that way. But I'm of the opinion that there was something in the water at some point in time that was working, and there's a sense of wisdom in the past. And I think that when we look at what was happening back then, what was really the difference? The parents are definitely different today than they were back then.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that the parents now tend to be a little bit more, sometimes I think that, and how do I say this that makes it sound not too offensive and not too, barbaric. But I think that parents now, I think that, in simpler times, when it came to giving children, what they want, what a child needs is not as complicated as we think it is.
Right.
And I think the problem is that we complicate the things that a child needs. I'm thoroughly convinced that everything that I needed as a child, I had it.
Yeah.
It wasn't money. It wasn't, being given everything that I wanted. It wasn't, it really wasn't even really the sit downs that I got, the sit down talkings that I had. I think that for me, and everybody's different, but for me, it was the visual. The biggest impact it had on me, the thing that kept me out of trouble, the thing that put me on the right path, was watching very simple men. That stuck with me about, the old school, very simple men, the way they moved, and their lessons were not, they were not, they never treated me as a young man. I was never treated like a little boy. And so, I would pick up on things that were being said, and I would watch the things that they were doing, and it was about what they were doing more than it was about what they were telling me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, at least during that period, it wasn't the, Leave It to Beaver type of situation. You know what I mean? That we see. It was really a more or less, old school, situation that was not complicated, that I comprehended, that resonated with me, and it stuck with me all my life. And the older I get, the more I remember. And so now what we've done is we've complicated everything. We complicated everything where we have to figure out, how do I take, little Johnny and make sure that we, come up with some, brilliant scheme about teaching them, okay, when you do this, make sure you do this. When you do this, make sure you do this. When you do whatever, then you should do certain things. Every now and then I got that little spanking too.
Yeah.
Now we don't think, we think, okay, it's wrong to spank kids. Now you have to, give them certain type of, everything is an urgent thing. And I mean, it's just, and now you got now you have CPS involved in everything you do with your children now.
Yeah.
And so the government's involved with helping you raise your children from the perspective of disciplining your children. And it's just too much. I think that we're overthinking children. The children, it's not. You would think that children just existed about 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it's new.
Right.
It is. We're reinventing a wheel.
Yeah, but I think we're fighting against. I think we're fighting against other entities as well in order to keep them away from them. And I think that's why we come up with all these grandiose ideas in order to prevent them from going down a certain direction. And so, when you see the social media, like we fight against the social media with kids all day long. We fight against the video games all day long. And I think certain parents are at a disadvantage. And I think that they try to come up with all these different solutions in order to combat this. Because, I mean, how many times we've seen videos where kids are in school and fighting their teachers because the teacher took the phone? Or the parent took the phone. You see what I'm saying? And kids have become so caught up with a certain element in this society where that's the norm for them. And if you take them out of that, if you take it away from them, they become aggressive because this is their only way of functioning. And I think parents are trying to figure out, how can I combat this? I mean, when you were coming up, of course, there were different people that you were able to see that was very productive, and you were able to see those individuals. Now these kids, they don't have people that they can look at in the community. Even if it's just the dude that's next door that's building on a car, you know, you don't see it as often, and so they look for stuff. They try to find this identity somewhere, and they can't find it.
So it's not the children. The problem is not the children. The problem is us.
Correct.
And the problem is us from the perspective that, the way in which we move and the lessons in which we give. I think that sometimes the parents have good intentions and they have, they mean very well. They mean well when it comes to dealing with their children. But I think sometimes I do believe there's a lot of overthinking, when it comes to our children. Children are a lot more simpler. The things that a child needs is so simple, but we make it more difficult, than it should be. And then there's another thing, is that we aren't prepared. We don't prepare them at a young age. We try to protect them for too long, and we don't prepare them at a young age for things that they may. And I'll say this, and one day, I'd love to bring my mother on this show to talk about it. I was, the best thing that my mother did for me is that I was never pampered. I was not. That wasn't the way it was. And it was the best thing that happened to me, that I was ready to deal with a world that was not and will never be fair. So we kind of raise children in a way in which whenever they are faced with some sort of challenge, they break down.
Correct.
They're not built to deal with challenges. And so, it's just like, think about this. When I look at this, if I tell someone that I literally started working when I was 13 years old in a hayfield, that seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We treat kids like they're babies until they're 18, and sometimes they're 18 and they still act like they're babies. So what would make you think that a kid that's 12, 13, and 18 years old is not going to have problems when faced with issues if they've been treated like a baby?
Yeah.
Some of these kids are treated like babies. There's going to be a lot of people that's not going to like what I'm saying, but it's true. Because the world, no matter, you can do whatever you want. You cannot protect your children forever.
Correct.
I mean, one day you're going to have to go out and be up on your own. And I can say this, Whatever happened to kids wanting to be adults to take care of their parents? Huh?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that? You know what I'm saying?
I got one of those though. But,
Huh?
I'm blessed. I said I have one of those though, but I raised mine old school. My 10-year-old is an old man, but I believe firmly in old school way of doing things, and it may not be the most popular thing to do, but I'm thinking about those things in particular, especially because I am a single mother raising a young black male who this world's not looking at him as an innocent little goofy little smart boy who loves video games, and they're not looking at him like that. So I raised him old school. So I do have one who's going to take care of me. But, I'm just, a little different.
Yeah. And I will say, how you said, that kids are built different nowadays because of what we instill in them. And like you say, kids can't handle certain things. They break down. I can't do it. I remember early on, one of the first things that I taught my kids, and any one of them you can ask any given day saying, what can you do? They always tell you anything I put my mind to. And I remember a conversation I had with my son at one particular time. I told him that, look, you're going to have to start working. And this was when he was 14. He's 15 now. This is like a year ago. But I told him, I said, nah, man, you got to start doing this. You got to start doing that. He said, Dad, I can't do it. I said, you can't. I said, I want to hear you can't, But, then I asked him, I said, why you can't? He said, because I go to school. When I come home from school, I'm already burnt out from being at school, and then you want me to work on computers and you want me to do this. And I said, what do you do every day when you come home from school? He said, I do my chores. And I said, what do you do after you do your chores? He said, well, I play my video game. I said, so you got enough energy to play your video games, but you don't have enough energy to work. And that's where they get it twisted at. And so I realized that I had to stop that early on, I had to stop that because kids nowadays, they so confined to their homes and what they have there. You don't take them out, you don't show them the world, and they can't stand pressure because we've given them. Kids nowadays feel like they entitled to certain things. You see what I'm saying? And we put that on them. We made them like this. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
They feel they entitled. I said, no, the only thing that I'm entitled to do is put a roof over your head, food in your mouth.
Right.
That's it. That's all. Anything outside of that is a freebie.
You may see the movie Fences.
Yeah, I remember Fences.
And
Yes, there's a lot. Yeah,
right.
exactly. And I showed my son that
clip, that particular
part.
clip.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, I think that's important. I mean, showing them how to work for how to work for what they have. Showing them things aren't going to go your way, and being prepared for what because I think to me, things are more difficult. Things are more stressful. Things are more, there's too many people in our children's ear. And so I think it's critical to raise them in a way in which, they're not clinging to, I remember seeing, I'm going to tell this the story. I didn't want to tell this story because maybe the person that I saw doing this when I wasn't watching it. I was at my lobby I think I told you this one time. I was in the lobby of my office one day, and someone pulled up with a kid in the car, and the kid gets out of the car, little kid, goes to the trunk, pull out a stroller, and get in the stroller.
Ooh.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? So, I don't understand that, but I do believe that we have to, and then we're at a place where everybody gets a participation trophy because they don't want you don't want to feel bad. And the old saying, I remember I put this post about my mother. I said, thank you for teaching me how to win, but most importantly, thank you for teaching me how to take a loss. And we don't want to teach them. The key to life is knowing how to take a loss.
Exactly.
Right.
And
right.
we don't want to teach we want our children we want to believe that our children are the smartest, the brightest, and the best at everything.
Correct.
Everybody brags on their kid and they think their kid is good at everything, which is not good. You know, your kid's gonna, as Denzel Washington said at a commencement ceremony, you're gonna suck at something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the thing is that basically, you know, and that's important. You know, what do you do when you lose?
Correct.
You know, if you crying because because you lost, do you hug them and pat them and say it's okay? You'll get it the next time, or you tell them to suck it up. You're not supposed to cry. Don't cry about that. You lost, suck it up, right? And learn. And that's, you know, that's the great thing about playing athletics to me, is that, you know, it teaches you how to deal with the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Right? You're in the fourth quarter, suck it up, keep your head up, keep fighting.
Yeah.
If you lose the game, then you go out and you get prepared and you get ready to play the next game.
Exactly.
And it should drive, and you teach it how it should drive you. Crisis should drive you to do better. And mistakes are important, because if you don't make mistakes, you'll never learn.
Correct.
And what we want to do is we want to teach our children that, you know, you don't make mistakes. You know, you're perfect. You want to be you don't want them to feel bad. But you feel bad now instead of feeling bad when you're like 19 and you can't deal with it and mom and daddy aren't around you. You need to get those experiences. I mean, the best thing that happened to me is the crisis, losing a game, not getting a trophy, and you know, being told that, you know, not to cry. You know, that's not the way you don't be a sore loser. You know, you put it together, you fight, and then you go after it the next time. And that's what life is all about. Because if you don't know how to lose, then how are you going to take issues? Because life is constantly about situations.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And that's the most important thing. And I see that way too much. You know, I have granddaughters who played softball. You know, they you know, did very well, I think, in softball. But, you know, if they lost, you can feel bad.
Yeah.
Because you want to win. But you can't quit. You can't quit.
Correct.
Because you're going to get a spanking if you quit. If you say, you know, I don't want to go back on the field because we lost. You're not quitting. If you start it, you're gonna keep going. You're gonna keep playing, because you don't quit anything. But now it's like the kids, if you lose, you get a participation. I don't believe in participation trophies.
Yeah.
If you lose it, man, you lose
it. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And
Correct.
then you know, because you're not good. That's not how life works. You don't win. You don't get something just because you participate.
Yeah.
You don't get, the calls aren't going to go your way. We talked about the football. You remember the football analogy when I said being black is like
Correct.
playing playing a away game.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, you're playing in you're going to be playing on somebody else's field and somebody else's stadium, but you play.
Exactly.
You play to win. And you know, you don't leave, you play so hard and you blow them out so you don't have to leave it in the hands of the referee. And if you if the calls don't go your way, then, you know, it didn't go your way. That means that the next time you go over there and you play, you say, I'm not going to leave it in the hands of the officials anymore, because the next time I'm going to be so prepared, I'm going to blow them out.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
And you know, I think that we have to begin to start kind of dealing with them, you know, a little bit, you know, from that perspective about, you know, you can't, or if something goes wrong, you know, you don't get what you want, then we're gonna go jump on the coach. We're gonna go jump on the teacher because they didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it didn't go their way. And I just think that we need to, you know, start teaching them at a very young age about how to suck it up, keep your head up, keep fighting, and if you lose, then you work out harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's real big. I think that's real big when you say you have to teach them how to respond if they lose, because it's their attitude after that loss that's going to determine their future, so to speak. You know, because if you lay down, you lay down. You don't get back up. You don't try. You don't.
Right.
And they always say, "What's the a try is always better than a failure." You
Oh
know,
yeah.
you gotta.
There's
keep trying.
the one thing that's for sure: if you quit, you're not gonna win.
Yeah.
You're not gonna accomplish it. That's
Yeah.
the guarantee.
And you never know whether or not you're able to accomplish it, because
Yeah.
you quit, you gave it up, you know.
Right.
And I think that, like you say, I think that's very big, that we have to start teaching the kids that, because kids fold under pressure.
Yeah.
They built different
Yeah,
nowadays,
they are.
and I think they built different based on based on our teachings and based on what they hear all the time, you know. I mean, I stay on my son. I mean, you know, and the thing about it is when I sit here, I think about my parents, right? And I think about the way my parents taught me. And then I think about how I'm teaching my children. And don't get me wrong, I ain't never had it all right all the time.
Right.
You know, it's a learning process.
Absolutely.
Even, man, I'm 54 years old and I'm still learning
Right.
how to be a father. I'm
Right.
still learning how to be a
Absolutely.
good dad, you know?
Yeah.
And so in that process, I know that if I hear something, I can take it and I can apply it and not feel ashamed about, you know, the way I was teaching, you know? And so I think that's how parents have to start looking at it. Parents have to start, you know, even if they have to change their way of teaching in order to bring their kid back to this straight line, then change your way of thinking. Because I would rather for me to do it than somebody else
Right.
to do it. Because somebody else gonna do it, they ain't gonna do it like you gonna do it. You doing it with love. You doing it out of passion. You doing it because this is you know your seed. But when somebody else is doing it, they can care less. You know, I'm looking at, you know, you want them to go to juvenile hall. You know, the school teacher ain't gonna do it like you. The correction officer is not gonna do it like you. So you have to make a conscious decision that if you need to bend and you need to, you know, lower your pride. You know, kids are rough these days. Kids are gonna challenge you these days. You know, but you have to be able to stand up to them and you know, give them proper guidance, because if you don't, they're gonna be in the hands of somebody else.
Right. I mean, and that's just like, you know, when it comes to, I mean, it's just, yeah, there's things that I would do. There's certain things that at my age that I would never say to my mother that kids, you know, that are 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 would say to their mother. And we want to be friends with our children.
Yeah.
And that's a big
That's
mistake.
big.
You're not, you know, you're not, I never felt like I was my mom's friend. I never felt like I was my granddad's friend. I never, you know what I mean? I wasn't their friend. They, I was a child. They were my elder, and I was supposed to give them, you know, certain amount of respect.
Yeah.
Or all the respect. And, you know, there was things that I didn't understand at the time. I didn't understand why I couldn't quit playing baseball. I thought that was mean at the time. That I'm like, you know, I like playing football and I like playing basketball, but I don't like baseball. And to be told that you can't. But she knew something that I didn't.
Correct.
That you can't quit. And I learned a valuable lesson, because if you're going to be, your ability to be successful at something, and discipline is doing something that you don't like to do.
Correct.
And doing it anyway. And we're always into saying work-life balance. If another person says work-life balance to me, I'm going to slap them. Work-life balance. I mean, who's going to do something that everything that they do in that situation is they're going to like it?
Yeah.
That's what everybody wants to do, is like, I mean, you know, I want something so that has meaning and purpose, and every day, you know, I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
Huh?
But that's all they see on social media, so they have this false reality, thinking that this stuff is real. They're living in this fantasy. You know what I mean? That's why, like, I'm the unpopular one right now, because I really limit how much social media my 10-year-old can watch, because I've noticed his conversation starting to change in regards to what he's thinking is real and what he's thinking is not, and even seeing some of these kids with their parents, you know, pranking their parents extremely disrespectful. And my son is starting to think that, like, that's the norm. That's how stuff is supposed to, you know, how life is, how life really, really is. I don't know. I feel like, number one, like you said, we do need to change our way of thinking, but I think, too, social media has even more of an influence in regards to what these kids are thinking and how they're processing stuff and what they're doing and how they're so soft and stuff now. I think social media has a huge impact on that, and it also has an impact on us, because there's a lot of us that are this age that are addicted to social media too.
Is it social media?
I think so.
I mean, social media actually is an influence, and I do agree that social media does have an influence. But I think that, you know, we set them up sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying
Yeah,
that
we
what
do,
you're
yeah.
saying is not true. I'm saying in many ways we set them up. You know, a lot of what they have access to, you know, we make it accessible.
Right.
And
that's
I
the
think
problem.
I think that we have to be a little bit more, aggressive about what we what we want our children to have access to. Say you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. And I mean, of course, are kids going to go out there and do things that you told them not to? Of course they are.
Yeah.
But does that, but then we have this whole, idea about, I'm so tired of people trying to teach people how to raise children based upon some sort of book or
Yeah.
based upon some sort of,
Right.
I got a degree, and I don't believe, everybody's in everybody's business about how to raise these children. And I think that's where we made the biggest mistake, is allowing people in to tell us. We're saying, okay, now, like all these statistics, somebody's gonna make money.
Correct.
About somebody saying that now they're going to write a dissertation, they're going to get a PhD, and they're going to teach you how you're supposed to do your children, or how your children are supposed to, how you're supposed to deal with them. And and how you got to give them a quiet space. You got to give them this. Are you listening to Johnny? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This whole academic type of way of dealing with it, and reading statistics and being we got to get back to just good old. This is grandmama, granddaddy. This is how you raise them, and this is what you're doing, instead of just getting into calling. How am I going to call someone in to teach me how to raise many of these people who are experts? They don't even have children.
Exactly.
And they're writing books on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? About this is what corporal punishment does.
Exactly.
This is what such and such does. This is what all right, now you're in CPS custody.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to send you to parenting classes. We're in family law. I'm going to send you to parenting classes. And this person is going to teach you, you're going to take this parenting class so you can deal with how to parent classes, because you're involved in this situation where you got mom and dad beefing with each other. And then the kid is going to say dad is bad because or mom is bad because dad is going to give you things that mom don't give you, and not give you a structured environment. And so you're going to tell the CPS worker that one is better than the other.
Correct.
And now you got everybody else in the middle of your business that don't have no business being there.
Exactly.
And these people that are fighting, and so now everybody's in Johnny's business because mom and dad are beefing over their little personal issues and not doing what is best for the child.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of that going on. And then we go into the whole issue of, people game the system.
Yeah.
And they game children in a way that they used to not do it.
Yeah.
So in other words, if I'm having trouble, mom having trouble with you, then basically I'm going to make up a narrative that makes you look like a bad person so that you can't be around Johnny because I'm mad at you because we couldn't get along, and now Johnny becomes a statistic because he don't have dad in his life.
Right.
So now the court's going to say, well, you're going to have supervised visitations instead of just having visitations.
Yeah.
So we got all that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And people in our business where we didn't have other people in our business, and allowing us to raise our children the way that the old school way. And that's why we have so many different problems. We don't know how many of these children who are trying to commit suicide have those issues that we just talked about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where mom and dad aren't trying to work things out for the sake of the children and carry on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have them where they still own one. You know what I'm saying? And now they got these issues. I mean, it's such a, and I could be wrong, but I'm of that opinion that is what's wrong. And kids, they can't take anything. And I mean, it goes all the way up into the 20s now.
Oh, yeah.
You got 25, 26, 27, 30-year-olds. They can't even take work.
No.
Everybody's stressed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about how I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because or they get overwhelmed because like like you go to work and like the internet's down. Can we go home?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the internet's down. I mean, we don't know how to,
And to some extent, I understand the aspect about social media having influence on them, but like you say, the parents have to limit that type of access. And I think where it becomes an issue is that, we so caught up with trying to provide in this sense that, I remember Dick Gregory said this one day. He says, you're required to get 8 hours of sleep, go to work for 8 hours, 16 hours and gone. Then you come home and then you have to tend to the kids and feed them another 3-4 hours are gone, and you back repeating the same history over and over again. And I think what happens is parents come home and they don't want to deal with their children. They don't want to be parents. They want to allow the social media and the computer and the phone to be that babysitter while they get that rest.
right.
And that's where it becomes a problem. And right now, I believe that they're conducting classes right now because of kids are becoming so addicted to social media and video games to where they actually creating something that's called an addiction. And I would say this, and I'm not exempt from this story, because I've had my children at one point in time get so consumed with the phone and get so consumed with the game to where when I took it away from them, they said, we're bored. What we supposed to do? We're bored, right? And if that is your reality, your child is addicted. And then it becomes a problem because if they don't have it, they rather sleep.
Right.
That's an addiction. And now I've imposed, and my wife imposed that, look, when we go out, when we have a family night out, when we have a family day out or a family weekend, there's no phones.
Yeah.
Because we want them to be able to experience the world. And some kids don't experience it. You can go out camping, you can go out nature walking, you can go out to Magic Mountain, and the kids still got the phone in their hand.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that's really important when you talk about being bored is there's very little creativity. And I think it also impacts our creativity of kids.
Correct.
I remember, we had to figure out a way that we had to play, keep ourselves entertained because we didn't have those video games, and we didn't have all of those other things, our telephones or internet. I mean, we were more creative. Even when it comes to the arts, I mean, kids, have figured out ways to manipulate and not manipulate. I guess that's not the proper term, but figure out ways they can benefit through using social media and other platforms, and but at the same time there is no creativity. Just listen to our music, as people are just kind of like recreating different things as opposed to being a lot more creative. I mean, we were very creative as kids because you had to be creative, and it also had an impact on your mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that we've lost the creativity that that we once had. So, I mean, it's just we definitely have to get back, in my opinion, to a more simpler time and focus more on a lot more of simpler methods of trying to raise our children. And when we say, we're constantly trying to say, what are we doing? Why are we losing our children? And, why are things getting this way? And it's because we're going a different way. Children it's just a totally different, animal. The same, another thing too, is that, the values. I mean, you're not allowed to teach children values anymore. There was a time where that was at the forefront. And I'm not promoting one religion over another, but I'm telling you that, that is something that we that's not even there anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't even look at that, and that's the center stone of it. I mean, and there's people who are very critical of it, those types of values as it comes from faith and spirituality. But you know, it's going to be a difficult. Your life is going to be a difficult road if you don't have faith in something. If you don't have faith in something, you're going to have a problem. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care what you do in life. I don't care where you go or where you come from. If you don't have that faith in something higher than you, you're going to have a problem. It's going to be very difficult for you. And you know, instilling that in, you know, as well as a measuring stick, not only for your child but for you as a parent, is critical. And we tend to think everything else is important except that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And we've completely, in fact, it's a bad thing now. You know, you're not, you know, you can't talk about it.
Yeah.
You can't be about it.
Yep.
And, you know, it's just completely out the window. And we're not doing ourselves a service by not recognizing the significance of that. And that is one of the things that's definitely gone, you know, where, you know, young people spent a significant amount of their time back in the day in one of those religious institutions.
Correct.
You know, that was the center stone of what you did. And you didn't want to go. You remember you watched the Kings of Comedy when Steve Harvey, that they went so much that they're like, you know what I mean? But it does matter. And if you think if you think that you can make it that way, then just wait.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they got something for you, and everybody wants to. And if you know, it is what it is. You know what I mean? And it might not be politically correct to say that, but it's important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's going to be difficult to make it. And watch those who are the most successful.
Yeah.
And tell me how many of those people who are the most successful don't have that in their life. Huh?
Yeah.
They do. You know what I mean? It's part of their life because they got something for you. Because, you know, like I said, man, when they get out there and they got something for you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They got something for you. I know they got something for you because I've been through it. I go through it on a daily basis as a black man. But at any rate, it went by quick, didn't it? Well, how you like that show? It was? All right. How you like that, Andrea?
It was good. We could have kept going.
Yeah, we
There's
could.
a lot we needed to get on.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in for Justice Watch. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place, same channel. Until that time, stay blessed.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
You're listening to an encore presentation of this program, KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
The views and opinions expressed by individuals on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of the network, Guys Guy Radio, and its platforms.
It's Guys Guy Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manny.
Welcome to Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manny, welcoming you to the show where men and women can be at their best and everyone wins. Guys Radio. We're here to inform you, inspire you, empower you, and get you to think, feel, and who knows, maybe even act by virtue of the journeys, stories, experiences, and insights of the guests I bring you each and every week to the show. This week is no exception. This week we're going to talk about waking up, and it's not in the woke sense. It's about really waking up to what's going on out there in our world. We're going to talk about relationships with a skew towards relationships over 50. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about executive coaching and the value or sometimes lack of value there. But my special guest is Joni Lerner. She hosts the popular Wake Up with Joni podcast. I was recently a guest on her show. She's terrific. And we're going to just really chop it up about a number of topics that are relative to us boomer folks, particularly. And there's so many people out there looking for love over 50. You know, it's amazing. And the issues they have are pretty much the same issues they have that younger people have when they're looking for love or trying to maintain their relationships. it just keeps going, and it's all based on people and how we treat each other. And things don't change that much. They change a lot in some ways, but overall, they don't change that much in that we're still having the same issues, particularly between men and women when it comes to communication and when it comes to relationships. I've been privy to be a frequent guest on Second Act TV, which is a popular YouTube channel hosted by my friend Silke Schwarzkopf, and she's been on our show a number of times, as you know. And we have helped so many people out there in terms of at least having a forum, a platform to talk about some of the challenges that people have in relationships. And one of the things I've learned is that it doesn't matter what age you are, the basics of communication and looking for a partner and then maintaining relationships don't change that much regardless of what age you are. There's maybe some different terms that people use, and there's there's different technology, but basically it comes down to two people, whether it's a guy and a gal, or a he and a they and a her, or two women and two guys. It doesn't matter. It's all about communication between people. We're all human, and that's what we're really all about here on Guys Guys Radio. Treating people the right way, listening to what other people have to say, doing our best not to be judgmental, looking for the right qualities in relationships. And it's a challenge because, as I keep saying, things don't change that much. About 10 years ago now, I wrote my novel, The Guy's Guide to Love, which is about relationships, really. It's a rom-com, and it's been called the male successor to Sex and the City. And it's really about relationships and communication and the lack of. And I wrote the book. One of the reasons why was I was inspired because I thought there was this huge chasm of communication between men and women looking for love. And since the book came out, I think the chasm has grown even wider. So I'm going to be interviewing a number of relationship experts, most of them women, and we're going to be talking about their perspective, and I'm going to give my perspective on relationships, and we're going to skew it a bit to those over 50 because they seem to be having a lot of issues, and there's a lot of single people over 50, whether they're widowed or widowers or divorced or single, never got married or never settled down with anyone, and it's understandable. And ultimately, it seems to me, from my experience and talking to so many of these people and so many of these relationship experts, that everybody's looking for love and they're looking for a connection. And it's very challenging sometimes to get there. So we're going to do that on Guys Guys Radio with Joni Lerner. So stick with us.
It's Guys Guy Radio.
Okay, Guys Guys Radio. It's the radio portion of our show, and we've got a special guest today. I'm going to tell you about her in a moment, but we're going to talk about relationships. There's all types of relationships that we deal with every day in life, whether it's personal, romantic, business. There's just everywhere, and everything has to do with relationships. So I have no better guest to bring on than Joni Lerner. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a certified executive leadership coach. She's got a degree in metaphysical counseling. I'm going to ask her about that. And she's the host of the powerful Wake Up with Joni podcast. Her passion is empowering people to live their most alive lives. So she's very in sync with what we do here on Guys Guys Radio. She's an expert in both corporate leadership coaching as well as private strategic life coaching for both her generation as well as young leaders in the world. Her mission is to inspire all of her clients to wake up to their true potential. I've been on her show. She's fantastic, and we have a good connection, and I'm so pleased that she's joining us for the first time on Guys Guys Radio. So welcome, Joni Lerner.
Hi, thank you so much. What a great intro. I'm like, I want to coach with her.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
think people want to get to know you, Joni, as I have, and I really am impressed, and I really like you as an individual. You're real and you're authentic, and you have great insights, and you have a terrific speaking voice too. So I think we'll make some good music here. So tell us a little bit about, for the benefit of our listeners and our viewers who are not that familiar with you and your work yet, tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to where what you're doing now, which is coaching and also hosting Wake Up with Joni. You had some personal challenges of your own you had to get through, as we all do, and that makes us better teachers, if you will. Are you comfortable talking about what were they and how did you overcome your own challenges? And then did you use a coach during that time frame? So
Yeah.
talk to us, Joni.
All right. Let's start at the beginning. So I actually had my friend calls it, let me put it this way. My friend of 40 years, I said something about the parenting from my childhood, and she goes, "Oh, honey, you had no parents. You were raised by wolves." And I thought for a minute, I thought, well, that's kind of a compliment. But the first awakening, if you will, happened in my 20s. And I did an emotional intelligence training back then. It was the first time I realized, one, I could make a difference. Two, I had a choice in my life. And I had mentors there. And that was really important. It changed the trajectory, literally, of my life. Now, fast forward about 15 years, a little more than that later, I had 2 horseback riding accidents. 5 people close to me in my life died. My daughter was going through a very difficult adolescence. My mother had fallen and she was dying. I mean, so on and so forth. Oh, and by the way, it was around 2008, 2010, 2011. So now we have the financial crisis also. Everything about my life exploded and imploded all at the same time. And at one point, I had to ask myself, is this how I want to live the last 30 or 35 years of my life? Is that all there is? You know that song?
Yep,
Then
absolutely.
let's keep dancing. Okay. I had to make a decision. But first I had to wake up to what was going on in my life and then make a decision about how do I want to go forward. So at that point, I hit it with a spiritual shotgun, I always say. I got a trainer. Oh, by the way, in that morass, that quagmire emotionally, I gained 100 pounds. So I went from a size 6'8" to like a size 24. And it, it is a weird experience because people don't even recognize you and you don't know where your boundaries are. You're walking to a restaurant and you're knocking into chairs. It was as if I was in somebody else's body, you know? So I had to imagine taking a zipper at my throat and just unzipping the fat suit.
So
and it had, go ahead.
Was the trigger for this the accident with of the horse, or was that one of many? But was there one main kind of inciting incident that pulled this all together when you asked yourself, who am I? What's going on? Maybe this is a wake-up call for me. I have to do something about this. Was it all of these things at the same time, around the same time frame, or was one of those things really stood out that gave you the who am I kind of moment?
You know, that's an extraordinary question because no one's ever asked me that. I always just say, here are the many things,
right,
which seems to be enough. But here's the thing. Yes, it was my husband saying, you know, I don't think I want to be married anymore. And this was 2 days after my mother died. And it was this, yeah, but he's a really good, kind man. It wasn't like he was trying to load on. And this was a man that I never in my entire life thought would leave me, you know? He used to call us lobsters. So lobsters mate for life. And it triggered, I thought, oh my gosh, if this guy is saying I can't do this, then I need to really do something about this. That's when I got my leadership certification. That's when I began to look at getting the trainer, getting a therapist. I even did EMDR. So did I have a coach?
What is that EMDR?
Oh, that's an everybody has trauma in their lives. And when I say that, what I mean is if you're 2 years old and you reach up and mama doesn't pick you up, that's a trauma. Then you have people who experience accidents or abuse, so there are levels of trauma.
What is EMDR? What does it stand for? Those four letters.
It has to do with, gosh.
It must be emotional something or other.
Yeah,
okay,
it
I didn't
is,
mean that.
but
I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I was just curious.
well, it is a therapeutic
okay.
use. Like you have to go to a therapist who does this very specific thing, and what it does is it realigns or reconnects the 2 hemispheres of your brain. So how it was explained to me, and this is important, so I'll just explain really quickly, is like with the trauma, your brain kind of goes offline. And so instead of having all the files in the office, in the filing cabinets, they're in the hallway. And so we're tripping over those. I was tripping over those. So when I say when it's hysterical, it's historical. that means that if I'm reacting really violently to something emotionally, that means that there's a trigger, probably a trauma in the past. So what EMDR does is it helps refile everything in the proper place.
Got it.
Remarkable. Yeah.
Okay, so how long from so you start to get the realization that I got to fix things, and then you got the pile on from your husband unintentionally, as you say. How long did it take you to kind of make your move and get yourself back on your feet again to say, okay, now I got it?
So like 4 or 5 months where I really began to proactively do something about it. And I feel like I want to defend him because he is such a kind man. He doesn't even remember having the conversation. So maybe I misheard what he was saying, but it lit a fire under me.
Now, is this somebody you're married to now, or was
No, we were
past?
married 29 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And we did do couples counseling. We did a lot to try and save that marriage. But sometimes the contract is just done. So it was done.
And where did you study coaching? How did you get your coaching chops? Because kind of what I like to talk about coaching a little bit, because there's so many people, there's so many coaches now, and it's a good thing. And there's so many people who are looking for coaches, and it's just, and we want to help people. And you can get certified and be a coach or not or whatever. So how did you get trained? What was your training for coaching, and what was your main takeaway from that? Was it like, oh, I really needed to be trained to do this, or it's a common sense thing? Or tell us about it. Are there different schools of coaching that you considered, or tell us about coaching?
Well, there are
so many people are considering it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So many people consider coaching, going into coaching or working with a coach, and it's exploding business right now. So tell us about your kind of path in there.
Yeah, it's been exploding for a long time. And I think people do need to be certified or have some kind of training, because yes, we have life experience. We don't discount that at all. Like everything that I do in my coaching is from the trajectory of my life. It's everything I've ever experienced, really, starting with the emotional intelligence trainings. And then I got sober 38 years ago. And so there's that 12-step journey and mentoring people in that for 30 years. And then there is a higher echelon of certification, a federation of some kind. That takes longer to do. Mine was, I think, only five months or something like that. But then I continued to educate myself. So we were talking about reading books. Like right now, I just started. Can you see that? Gabor Mate, the myth of normal. I'm constantly educating myself.
Got it.
Speaking of which,
plus from your interviews, of course. So, I mean, it's an education. Being a podcast host, I've interviewed, I counted them up, like 750 people. They're all thought leaders, including yourself. And what happens is you get this education. They're specialized in one area, but you get to speak to hundreds of people and really pull from them and kind of build your, I don't want to say game, but your practice in terms of really having a good sense as to what's important, what isn't, what do people really know, what can they share, are there consistencies? It's like you look at religions around the world. They're different, but they're not that different in a lot of ways. They're organized religions, whereas the metaphysical and spiritual aspect is a whole other ball of wax there, where there's some things that are consistent and there are other things that aren't. And it ultimately comes down to people making choices all the time.
Yes. And I never, ever present anything as truth, or that this is the light in the way, or this is what you have to do. And the truth is, what you just said is brilliant, because every single guest that came on, I got to say, okay, that makes sense to me. I'm going to incorporate that into what I'm doing. I've leveled up. And that's how I approach coaching, because people don't come to me broken. They come to me with something that they want to fine tune. They want to enhance. They want to stop doing. They want to start doing, whatever it is. I approach it as, what's the whole person? What's going on in life? I think the medical community should be doing this as well, because we are a whole being, physical, mental, spiritual, and etheric. So
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, totally agree.
We could go down a deep rabbit hole there, but you know, your allopathic doctor doesn't tell you like what foods to eat, and there's just everything is so compartmentalized, and that you really have to, as a patient, you have to really be responsible for your health, preventative, because the way the system works is it's like when you bring your car in. You bring your car in for a checkup, and then they do some stuff, but you have to take care of your vehicle while you have it. Like if you just never change if you don't bother changing the oil, you're going to have problems over time. I'm not saying exactly how many miles, but self-maintenance is important. So Joni, and my special guest once again is Joni Lerner. She's an executive coach, and she also hosts the Wake Up with Joni podcast. We're talking about relationships today. So when people come to you, what is the consistent? Do you find that there's certain things that like, oh, another one of those that comes along where people nowadays in our culture have similar issues? I know obviously things are fragmented, but there must be some commonalities that you hear. Wow, people are really stressed about money or relationships, and it seems like everything's so difficult nowadays.
Yes, you're really good at this, Robert. Anyway, I want to just answer the last part of your last question before I forget. Yes, I had a coach. The man that I'm with now, we've been together for 5 years. He is an executive coach also, a life coach also, and a shaman. So we're talking 30 years of education and learning from him that I am just absorbing like a sponge. So, and that took me to another level. Now, to answer your next question, absolutely. Anxiety, stress, and living in victimhood, fear, and control. So I want to break that down a little bit if that's okay with you.
Please.
Okay. All right. So all of control, underneath all of control, us trying to control situations, people, things, is about fear. Fear that I'm not going to be taken care of, fear that I'm not going to get what I need, fear that something bad's going to happen. I'm going to control, and we do this with our children too. I'm going to control them so that I feel okay. I need you to act a certain way so that I don't get triggered. I need you to act a certain way so that I feel okay in my own skin. So it all comes down to becoming whole, period, as a human being, becoming whole and healed within yourself. And that's a huge part of relationships, because most people, and here's another one, they're looking for a relationship or a situation or thing to make them happy. So they're looking for something outside of themselves to somehow make them happy. And that's situational, and it's going to change, and that person's going to leave, or that car's going to get crashed, or whatever happens. Those things outside of us, they change. Everything's changed. So in science, right, the only consistent is that things change. Okay. Right? So if we're trying to keep everything the same and control everything, it's out of fear. And so we go to that. What is true? And here's the other part about being a victim. We make ourselves victims by telling a story about what's happened. So we can shift our perception so easily once we wake up to this, and change our entire experience of life. That's what coaching is to me.
Got it. Okay, let's talk about the 3 different types of relationships and how do you deal with them. So the first relationships, let's talk about the romantic relationships. I just did a segment that hasn't aired yet with our friend Silka on Second Act TV about kind of how to keep the fires burning when you're over 50. And that doesn't mean just from intimacy standpoint, but how to keep things going. You mentioned earlier that you had come to a point where the contract was over between you and your ex. What are some of the issues nowadays that people are facing in relationships under 50 and over 50? Let me give you a little background from my perspective in that I was inspired to write my novel, The Guy's Guide to Love, because I saw a growing chasm in communication between men and women. I think that gap, so I want to put the men's point of view there for women in the book. And now I think that the chasm has even grown further away from each other. And I think the issue may have been that men were using the mind and women were using the heart. And that's why the communication was misfiring. I actually think now that it's going the opposite way. that women, because of their success in the workplace, well deserved, and their achievements and recognition, are using more of the mental, and men are starting to get in touch with the heart space. And it's created even more chaos because now they're not sure what their roles are. Because many times I've talked to relationship coaches, and they'll say, who work with women, and they'll say, the biggest problem we have is turning the type A personality from our women clients off when they're dealing with relationships. Because what's happening is they're telling the guy what to do, and the guy's putting his hands behind his head and saying, okay. And then the woman is unhappy, and then the guy is not sure what's going on. But men are just, they're like lions sometimes, and we'll just do it. It's easier just to go along with the program. But it's a misdirection, it's a miscommunication, and it seems like the gap is gotten wider. Talk to me, Joni.
Well, no, this is fascinating to me because, as I think we might have touched on this a little bit. So within each of us, we have the masculine and the feminine divine, right? And men have been asked, so there's a whole toxic masculinity thing. Well, what's happened is, as women have stepped into these powerful positions and they've used a masculine power. That's the thing you're talking about, turning off when they go home at night, kind of thing. So they're using that masculine toxicity concept in what they're doing, because that's the model. So they started showing up in suits, and they started, being controlling.
The shoulder pads, right?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Well, even birth control was probably the biggest trigger to open up things in a positive way for women, because they got power from that, right? Birth control changed a lot.
Yeah, well, I think Gloria Steinem changed a lot, that whole movement. And so there's always a pendulum swing. So I think what has to happen is the man needs to understand what a healthy masculinity is and step into that. And the woman has to step, because if she's in her masculine and she's taking up all the masculine space, there's no, like you said, put the hand behind the head. There's no space for him to be his fully empowered, masculine self. So, and honestly, I personally had to deal with this, because what happens was, when we have children, we become the mother, and then I began to control everything. And so there was no space for my husband he just went and worked. He worked his butt off, my ex-husband. And so I had to understand the two of us couldn't undo what we had done together. It wasn't him, it wasn't me. So each of us has sort of 100% responsibility in the relationship, but we couldn't undo or fix that. We tried. So now coming into, fast forward, my new relationship, I want a man. I want a man who is in his masculine power. Well, what that means is that I've got to let him do that. So he has all these systems, he does all these things, and he knows how to do these things. And I want to weigh in on everything. And what I realized is that was me trying to control. So I had to step back and go, okay, yeah, you want to move the rock there? Move the rock there. You want to tie the tree that way? Tie the tree that way. And then let him realize he needs to move the stake out another 3 feet, rather than say, what do you think maybe? So I think it's a very, it's a hot button topic, the whole masculine thing. And the truth is, I love men and I love women. I just love people, right? I just want them to be themselves. And in this, it comes back to the wholeness. How do you heal yourself? Because in healing yourself, that's how you heal the world. Like, how do we fix what's going on? Heal yourself. Find the balance. Find the connection to the divine self. That's a little woo-woo, but there you go.
I agree 1,000%. Let's stay with the relationship things between couples and finding love, if you will. I was on a panel the other day, and there was a whole bunch of ladies on there, and I was like the one guy, and 2 other panelists were women, and the moderator was a woman, and they kept coming like, "You're the guy. What do you have to say?" And I was listening and listening and listening, and it seemed to me what I said, and tell me what you think, is that a lot of times with the women looking for the guys, they'll go and do the checklist and say, well, he has all these exterior things, so he fits all that stuff. but they don't ask themselves, yet they're unhappy. And a couple of the women in the chat room said, I realize my man is emotionally unavailable. We've been together for 3 years. I'm like, wow, that took a while. So my suggestion was, what I got a lot of like everything stopped in a good way was, I said, have you ever asked yourself, how do you feel about being with somebody in terms of dating? Start out with, how does it feel to have this conversation? How do I feel about this person? You go to the deli, you buy a sandwich. How do you feel about the person behind the counter who made you the sandwich? I don't think we're doing a good enough job tapping into our heart space, and particularly with women, because it might be they don't feel that they've been validated from their past growing up or whatever, and they're not trusting their heart. So they're in a type A situation at work where they've got to fix things. I got to make it happen. I can do this. They get into relationships and say the same thing. I can fix him. I got to do this. I'm going to make it work, instead of, how do I feel about this guy? How does he make me feel? People are asking me, like, what about his emotional availability and all that? I said, well, if somebody's responsive, and they said, well, can we ask questions like, how do you feel about being triggered? I'm like, no, that's not a good question to ask somebody, because it puts them on the defensive. But how do you feel when you're with this person? Talk to me, Joni.
So, okay, absolutely. Here's the piece that I would have added to what you said, which is, where's the mirror? If he's emotionally unavailable, where are you emotionally unavailable? What is it about who you are in the world that attracted that man into here, and what do you have to heal? Right? So the mirror concept is fascinating. If we're judging somebody because they think they're all that, well, where do you think you're all that? Where is your ego doing that? So again, it always comes back to healing self. But yes, you're absolutely right. So we overthink a lot in this particular society. We overthink. So you've got your type A, as you said, and they're in their head thinking. So our reality exists because we think. We have these thoughts. Now, the thoughts came from family, society, past, books, whatever it is. Now, where you make a decision is not in your head. As you said, they've got to drop down into their heart space. So the brain, fabulous instrument. Love my brain, right? But where the power is for me is my heart center. And that's just who I am. So there are 4 directions in shamanism, for example. The East is about clarity. The West is about heart. Guess where I live? That's where I was born. So what that means is then I need to work on, where do I draw power? So that's the South. And then the North is about strength. So we each come into, I have one of my clients is just power. No, she's strength, just muscles through. And getting her to drop down into the heart space and value that space has been an interesting challenge for me, right? So the balance is critical.
So
and
do you find, Joni, that some of the female clients that you work with sometimes have that issue where it's hard to like turn the dial when they get into their personal relationships versus their work mode, where they have to make it work? And with the relationships, they have to drop into that, as you said, into that heart space.
Right. So most type A women, they're in the dominant quadrant of the disc, for example. And what they have to learn is empathy. 1. 2 is that what I tell these people, and everyone I work with in the corporate world, it's a high echelon of leadership or C-suite people. So at the end of the day, you turn everything off and you say it's good enough. Because along with the type A goes the perfectionism stuff. With the perfectionism stuff goes the judgment stuff. So now she's judging her man, or she's judging herself, and that's usually where it starts, is that self-talk stuff, the negativity. So there's so many pieces, so many nuggets in what we're saying right now that you're eliciting. But that
let's go back to that notion of women looking for a guy, and they're looking and they're saying, okay, he's got the job, he's got the car, he's got the house, he's got all of these, the checklist. but they don't ask themselves, how does he make me feel? Even like when I'm talking with him, hanging out with him, do I feel good about being in his presence? Or is it just, well, he's got to work on that? Do they even, do you find that women are even checking in with themselves to say, how do I feel about this? Or are we in a position? Because I've been on a lot of online dates and it's like, I know this is the interview now and it's all about the checks. And it's not about how do we feel about just talking and hanging out together. How do we feel? There's not enough feeling. There's more thinking going on.
Okay, so emotional intelligence, the tenets of that are emotional awareness, like self-awareness, and then self-regulation. Those are the top two, and then empathy and goals and all that. But the top two, emotional awareness and then self-regulation. So I'm aware that this guy is triggering me. What's going on? Oh, that's not even about him. It's this old, the old relationship that I had. So we're talking emotional intelligence, which means awareness. So maybe they're not aware. God bless them. Not everyone's going to wake up in this lifetime. It's just not going to happen. So you get to, as a man, you get to go, wow, she's not on the same level in terms of emotional availability or self-awareness or self-regulation. She's just on the tracks.
Do you find that now that part of that emotional availability, that it's been all about the men, that now it's also about the women?
I see what you're asking me. Yes, but it's still about the men. Okay? It's still about both need to become more heart-centered or more connected, more self-aware, more, as you said, how's this person making me feel? That's incredible. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. says, don't ask your spouse, your husband, your wife, how are you today? Ask her or him, who are you today?
I love it.
Yeah. So in other words, what we do is, so if we're talking about old, relationships being together for a very, very long time, and you were talking about how to keep them fresh, be curious. Who are you today? Let's plan something really cool. Let's go on an adventure. Let's try hiking. Let's try laying here and staring at the stars.
Let's take it and let's dial it up a notch. Mm-hmm. When you're in a relationship, so as we shifted over into like, okay, now you're in a relationship, long-term relationships, and they can run out, the contract can run out. To me, it seems like not just let's do something together, but both people in the relationship working on themselves separately that can bring more to the table. Like, I learned how to golf, I'll bring you to the driving range, or I learned how to speak Spanish, let's practice it. Something where it's not just you have to force doing stuff together, but if you develop yourselves as individuals, there'll be more to bring to the table in the relationship. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, definitely. It makes you more interesting, right? When I did the metaphysical counseling degree, in the very beginning, it said, if you're in a relationship, beware, because you are going to change. You are going to basically go next level. And if your partner isn't willing to work on themselves or keep up with you, or at least support and whatever, you may lose the relationship. And at that point, the relationship was pretty much lost, so I wasn't really worried. But I didn't have the consciousness or the awareness or the tools to fix and or end that relationship in that moment. So I kind of went on a different
that's okay.
Tact there. Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about the same thing, which is like these long-term relationships and some of the things that can happen. It was interesting also about a lot of questions came out of this forum I was on the other day about how to find out how guys feel about things. And it's to me it's simple as find out, if you want to get them talking, if you want to get a guy talking, find out what he's passionate about and go along with it. Maybe he's passionate about the Lakers or whatever. So talk about basketball for a little bit and see if you can shift that into something else. But at least you've got him talking about something that he feels passion. My contention has always been, Joni, that men, usually if they don't say too much, that means they're fairly happy with the relationship. I know you mentioned that your ex kind of blindsided you. And I found that it usually comes from the woman, where a woman's bringing up a lot of issues over time in her own way. And she thinks the guy hears her, and he might not. Whose fault that is, it's probably a combination. But ultimately, she just said, that's it. And a lot of guys get blindsided and they say, wow, because the way men operate is if they have an issue, they bring it up. They hear out their partner, they agree or disagree, and then they go about their merry way. Maybe that'll be a deal breaker for them, maybe not, but they don't do the deep dive that sometimes the ladies like to do to keep at a certain point, guys are like, I don't have any other angles to discuss this issue on. That's just how men are wired. And women can go further and further and deeper. And to me, a lot of times the women I heard, they didn't know how to kind of get the guys out there talking about things. And it seems like, again, if you find their passions, you can open them up. If they have it, you can find out what's bothering them. You can find out what they want to do. One woman, she had moved to like Delray, Florida, and said, all the guys here, it's like, I have my money and I have my boat and, I just want to have sex with you. And, how do I get a conversation with them beyond that? And I said, well, why don't you say, hey, it seems like you've done it all. What's next for you? What are you interested in doing now? What do your next 5 years look like? What are you passionate about? What are some of your dreams? These open-ended things to get them to open up so it's not just about, I've got this, I've got that, and here's what I want from you.
Mm-hmm. Because that's very transactional.
Yeah, very exactly transactional. Yeah. How do people get past the transactional aspects of it when they're looking for a partner or when they're in a long-term relationship and it becomes kind of a tit for tat things to keep each other happy?
Right. So communication is critical, absolutely critical. And one of the most extraordinary things that a person can do for another human being is listen to them, not wait until they can get their little nugget in there and not wait to make them wrong or whatever it is. Really listen to the person. Let's say they're just starting to date. Really listen to what this man is saying. I was at a party the other night, and the guy, I said, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? And he said, now this is a brilliant, very intellectual, analyzing man. He said, I love dirt racing, car racing. And I'm like, well, what does that mean, dirt? So I said, here's what I said to him was, what do you love about it? That question, male or female, what do you love about it? I'm a golfer. What do you love about it? And he said to me, well, the dirt, every time they go around, the dirt changes. So the track changes. So the trajectory changes and the challenge changes. And it was like a chess game to him. So what do you love about that? And so I just want to, again, my ex-husband did feel blindsided when 4 years later I said, I'm done. As kindly and as lovingly as I could. I went to therapists. I went to, I did everything that I could. We did that, blah, blah. He felt blindsided. So what a great point that you're making. I think finding communication tools where you can actually say to the person, I said to my current person, having learned things, how can I make you happier? How are you, is there anything I can do? That's what it was. Is there anything I can do differently for your happiness? Now, again, I can't make him happy. He knows that and et cetera. But he said, I've never had anyone ask me that before. Because here's the deal. This is really critical. We came here on planet Earth to love, not to get love. So now we're back to the transactional thing. If I'm here to get love from you, well, what are you, a Pez dispenser? So, I came here to love. I came here to share. I came here to make a difference in any way I can. I didn't know any of that until way later in life, until after the dark night of the soul and the thing that I described in the beginning of the conversation.
Got it. So, you work with, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Separate subject, but I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to cover that. And then I want to get into your kind of basic ways of improving all relationships. But we didn't talk about the corporate yet. What do you find from a relationship standpoint and some of the communication issues that are happening in the corporate workplace now that you work on?
Oh, well, now we've got a lot of remote. So there's, you don't have the same cues, you don't have the same connection, you don't have the same camaraderie. The company that we worked with last year did some offsites in a leadership program, and they really were committed to their people, and they got it. And they became listeners of each other, supporters of each other, as opposed to cover your butt and where's mine? Me, me, me. Now that's transactional also. How do I contribute to the team? How do I contribute to the company as a whole, the organization? And then what's true is that the way I coach is it's pretty deep. I'll go in and under, depending on the person. Now, some of these corporate people who are incredibly successful have never done anything like this before in their lives, but they're being gifted this by the company. So they're like, okay, fine, I'll do it, you know, and then they coach and they're like, oh my God. One, I had no idea, because how's your life at home? How's your family? How's parenting? How's your work balance? How's your self-care? And we go through all of it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. When you contact the companies as a coach, do you go to the HR or the department heads, or how do you do that?
I have had the blessing of working with two extraordinary coaches. The man that I worked with recently, Hallett Leadership. So Dean Hallett was the CFO of Fox Studios for a couple of decades. Before that, he was the CFO at Disney. Well, he had somebody working with him, and Jack Swizig, who's also been on my podcast, and we did the leadership, which I didn't. The point, the upshot is, I've never had to contact. Jack did the first, and then we traveled the world doing the leadership, and then Dean finds the people, and then so very blessed that way.
Okay, let's get to, because we're getting tight on time. You have a kind of a core basis of 7 ways to improve all relationships. And once again, my special guest is Joni Lerner, the host of the Wake Up Joni with Joni podcast, all over the world.
That's true. Okay, so seven ways to improve your relationships, whether it's at home or at work or what have you. We already talked about one, which is communication, and one of the key components is listening. And then communicating, not passive aggressively, not with cruelty, verbal cruelty. Once it's out, you can't take that back. So if you are a person who gets really angry and just sort of has logorrhea and you verbally dump over people, you might want to get some coaching or some therapy or something to help fine tune that. But that tells me that person's in fear. Something about the relationship is causing them fear, and that's how they're reacting. So you want to ask yourself these questions. What are you afraid of? And what do I really want to happen right now in this conversation? And sometimes you need to say, I'm getting triggered. I'm going to come back in about half an hour. I love you. Okay, if it's a romantic relationship, but I'm offline. My limbic system is really active right now. I'm not at my prefrontal cortex where I can actually think about things. So let me come back to you. So communication is key. We talked about adventure. So having a sense of curiosity, really critical. Be curious about your partner. Now we can talk about not only new relationships, but old relationships. Continue to be curious about them. Stop going, oh, I know who he is. I know what he does. And it's the same old, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not very exciting. And it's certainly not going to sexually arouse anyone or romantically, support the relationship. So be curious. What do you want to do now? Like you were saying, how do you envision our relationship in a year? Can we get an RV? Can we buy a house on the mountain? That's what we did. So be curious. The podcast is called Wake Up with Joni. The reason it's called Wake Up is because, and this is the third one, which is awareness. Become aware. Become aware of your, how much of you is living in the past. How much of you are you putting your person in a box? They can't get out of the box if you stick them in there. Be curious about and wake up to who you are, who they are, and where do you want to go together? As a partnership. Freedom. So we want freedom, but we want security. But we want freedom, but we want security.
Right.
That's part of the human condition, right? So how do you create freedom within the relationship? So maybe it's learning how to paint or learning a new skill, as you said, or maybe each of you go off and do something new and you come back and you talk about it. So there's realizing that coming together in relationship is not a loss of freedom. It is the end of an old way. I was single and now I'm a partner. Ooh, this is exciting. How is this going to unfold? Commitment. That's probably the fourth one. Yes, commitment to each other, but commitment to yourself. What is your commitment to your health? What is your commitment to your communication? What is your commitment to your experience of life? If you're committed to learning how to be joyful, that's incredibly powerful. So healing. So what happens is in the blush of relationship, everything's all fine and pink cloudy and everything's terrific. And then once you get that security piece, the old wounds begin to surface. So healing is another piece of having really healthy relationships, your own healing. Make sense?
Got it. Okay.
Okay. All right.
You have any more? I don't want to cut you off, but we're getting tight.
Okay. No, that's it.
Okay.
That's
all right. All
just
right.
release people from the box. That's it.
Got it. Okay. Wake Up with Joni is the name of the podcast. My special guest, Joni Lerner. Fantastic job. We'll see you again here, I hope. And in the meantime, please tell everybody where they can learn more about you and find your work.
Okay. So wakeupwithjoni.com. You can email me at wakeupwithjoni@gmail.com or Instagram at wakeupwithjoni. Pretty
Excellent.
Uniform.
Okay. All right. Well, great job. Great seeing you again, Joni, and all the best.
Too.
And thanks for being on Guys Guys Radio.
My pleasure. Thank you for all you do.
It's Guys Guy Radio.
Okay, a terrific conversation with Joni Lerner. Welcome to Guys Guys Radio, Joni Lerner. She's terrific. And again, her podcast is Wake Up with Joni. And we talked about a lot of things. We talked about executive coaching, whether it's on a personal level or at a corporate level, and how much value is there and how to find the right value. And we talked about relationships and communication. And it all comes down to the same thing, really listening, being open-minded and not being judgmental, and making room in your heart for somebody else to come in if you want to have a relationship. And it seems that the same mistakes are made over and over again by people who are looking for love, in that they have too many demands. They're not looking enough at themselves as to how do I feel, what do I have to offer, what do I want, and what are the main values that are important. And again, a lot of times we dance around the outside where we're looking for a relationship and we're sizing up and qualifying a partner as we would a business transaction or a sales lead, and we say, oh, they have all of this stuff, but we don't really, and we think we can make it work because of that. Maybe they have the right car and the right job and the right home and the right amount of money and etc. But do you enjoy your time with them? How does this person make me feel? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves when we're dealing with people. How does this person make me feel? How do I feel about this person? How do I feel when I hang around with them? And that's, for relationships, that's huge, because I can tell you, somebody who is a success story in that I met my wife on Match.com. She winked at me 14 years ago. Now we're married. We have a 10-year-old son. Is that you're going to spend a lot of time together, and you got to feel comfortable and good about the other person. And regardless if they have all the check marks, you got to really feel good about the other person. And, think about your friends. The ones you hang out with are the ones that you feel good about. The ones you don't hang out with, they don't make you feel good. So it's as simple as that. So Guys Radio, we're here every Wednesday evening on KCAA Radio in Southern California, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. The show is rebroadcast on KCAA every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. They also have all of their own streaming. You can stream, you can listen live, you can download. Our podcast, YouTube and Rumble, and we call it YouTube and Rumble, which is the video portion of our show. It's the interview. You can catch them on what we call Guys TV. And you can also use my name if you want to find the show, just Robert Manny, Guys TV. And we launch those every Thursday, the next day after we are live on, we're aired on KCAA. And then we're also on UK Health Radio all weekend long, 4 times every weekend. And so you can find us anywhere. You want to watch the show, you want to listen to the show, you want a podcast, you want a radio show, you want YouTube, you want Rumble. We're there for you. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so you can catch me there. And my website is robertmanny, MANNI.com. I've got over 300 blog posts about life, love, and pursuit of happiness. Lots and lots of the topics we cover here on Guys Radio. If you want to download 3 free chapters of my novel, The Guy's Guide to Love, you can do so at my website, and then you can pick up the book if you enjoy it, physical copy or digital copy, wherever you buy your books, probably easiest to find on Amazon and the other e-tailers. But we're there for you. And if you enjoy the guests and the content I bring you each and every week to Guys Radio, I ask you for one favor: follow us, review, rate, subscribe, particularly to our YouTube channel. We're doing our best to grow that quickly because it's new. And I thank you for that. I thank you for the support. I love doing the show. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a bunch of kind of relationship experts, most of them women, that are going to be on the show over the next couple of weeks. And we had one last week also, Silka. So thank you so much for your support. I thank all the wonderful 700 plus, probably 750 plus guests I've interviewed now for the 560 some odd shows we've done. I thank my wonderful producer, Chris. I thank Ryan, my strategy guy. And most of all, I thank you, my wonderful audience. We're going to keep doing this every week for you. I've got a great lineup all summer long. So please stick with us on Guys Radio. I love doing the show. I love bringing you information that hopefully you can use to make your life as good as that can be. So thank you. I'm going to see you next week. And until then, like I always like to say, guys, finish first.
KCAA. The message of Brother Stair lives on here in Southern California on KCAA, Monday through Friday from 1 to 5 a.m. Hear the worldwide broadcast of the Overcomer Ministry from the Faith Cathedral Fellowship. Call for prayer requests or to make a donation at area 843-599-1215, beginning at 1 a.m. Monday through Friday. Hear it here on KCAA, AM and FM. It's that time of year again. No, not the holidays. Medicare open enrollment. And if you have questions about Medicare, you should talk to the local experts. Paul Barrich and Associates. Paul and his agents are certified with plans that are accepted by most of the medical groups in our area. Call 909-793-0385. Their services are free, and after 41 years in the business, their agents are trained to help you pick the plan that's right for you.
Hi, I'm food critic Alan Borgen, and I'm excited to tell you about Ray's Shanghai Bistro, located next to Redlands DMV on Lagonia in Redlands. Ray's Shanghai Bistro offers the largest and most delicious array of traditional and original Chinese dishes available in the Inland Empire. Some of my favorite dishes are the house-made pot stickers, the crisp pork spare ribs with garlic, their unique spicy lamb with bamboo, the sweet and tangy deep-fried orange peel beef, and the savory basil spicy shrimp, plus lots of vegetarian dishes. Whether you dine in, pick up the food, or have them cater your next party or special occasions, you will see why Ray's, spelled R-U-I'-S, Shanghai Bistro, is truly the best Chinese restaurant in the Inland Empire. Their website is raysshanghai.bistro.net. That's raysshanghai.bistro.net. R-U-I-S, shanghai.bistro.net. Happy eating. You won't be disappointed.
The Mortgage Voice is Jeff Barton, your mortgage advocate here on KCAA. Jeff informs you of the ever-changing mortgage industry. Mortgage loans can be confusing and overwhelming, but Jeff and his guests will help you understand the difference in various loans and help you own or keep your home.
Trust is the major issue here, right? If someone doesn't trust you with their most intimate financial details and secrets, it's going to be very hard for them to do a loan.
Tune into The Mortgage Voice every Saturday afternoon at 3 and Sunday at noon here on KCAA 1050 AM and 106.5 FM.
This segment is sponsored by PressPrint, Southern California's best full-service union printer and mail house. They offer the lowest prices around with unmatched service and reliability and free delivery throughout SoCal. PressPrint can print anything from letterhead, business cards, and campaign literature to mailers of any size, lawn signs, banners, door hangers, or just about anything you might want. PressPrint promises to save money for you, your business, or your campaign. If you'd like to learn more, contact Mike Krumbrand at PressPrint 714-399-8708. Get the union bug.
Tahibo Tea Club's original Pure Pau de Arco Super Tea comes from the only tree in the world that fungus does not grow on. As a result, it naturally has antifungal, anti-infection, antiviral, antibacterial, anti-inflammation, and anti-parasite properties. So the tea is great for healthy people because it helps build the immune system, and it can be truly miraculous for someone fighting a potentially life-threatening disease due to an infection, diabetes, or cancer. The tea is also organic and naturally caffeine-free. A 1-pound package of tea is $49.95, which includes shipping. To order, please visit TahiboTeaClub.com. Tahibo is spelled T like Tom, A-H-E-E-B like boy, O. Then continue with the word tea and then the word club. The complete website is TahiboTeaClub.com or call us at 818-610-8088. Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. California time. That's 818-610-8088. TahiboTeaClub.com.
NBC News Radio, I'm Chris Coraggio. Reports say there was never any danger to the U.S. Capitol after fighter jets scrambled when a Cessna violated U.S. airspace in Washington, D.C. today. An FAA release says the small plane was headed to New York this afternoon after taking off from a northeastern Tennessee municipal airport, but crashed in a mountain area of southwest Virginia. Bowie, Maryland authorities say a sonic boom heard by many was from a plane out of Joint Base Andrews. The small plane can carry up to a dozen passengers. It's not yet clear how many were on board. SpaceX launched a fleet of new Starlink satellites into orbit early Sunday morning from the Florida coast.
3, 2, 1, ignition, engines full power, and liftoff of Starlink 6-4. Go Starlink, go Falcon.
A Falcon 9 rocket carrying nearly 24 V2 mini satellites lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station just after 8 a.m. I'm Chris Coraggio, NBC News Radio.
KCAA Radio, Loma Linda, where no listener is ever left